Today, we're digging into one of the world's biggest, most ambitious, and honestly, most controversial energy projects, Canada's tar sands. You've got a project that promises just immense wealth, but you have to ask, at what cost? We're going to explore this really high-stakes balancing act between economic prosperity and, well, environmental protection. So first off, what exactly are we even talking about? Tar sands, or oil sands as they're also called, they're not your typical oil deposit. I want you to imagine a thick, almost solid mix of sand, water, clay, and this super heavy, sticky form of crude oil called bitumen. Getting usable oil from this stuff, it is a massive industrial undertaking. And the scale here is just, wow, it's staggering. Canada is sitting on an estimated 170 billion barrels of recoverable oil. That makes its reserves the third largest in the entire world. But here's the crucial part. A whopping 97% of that oil is locked away in these tar sands. So that massive reserve presents a pretty fundamental question, right? Is it this incredible energy jackpot promising security and prosperity for a nation? Or is it a really costly gamble with consequences that might just be too high to pay? To really understand this, here's what we'll do. We're going to explore the sheer scale of the energy buried in Canada. Then, we'll look at the powerful economic engine it fuels and weigh that against its steep environmental price tag and the heavy human cost. And finally, we'll come back to that really difficult balance. First up, let's talk about Canada's buried energy. The epicenter of all this, of the tar sands, is the province of Alberta. That's where that 170 billion barrel treasure lies, right beneath this vast boreal forest. Okay, now for the economic engine. The argument for developing the tar sands is built on some very, very compelling numbers. Look, this industry is an absolute titan. It employs hundreds of thousands of Canadians, injects billions of dollars into the economy, and it represents a huge source of exports and foreign investment. Plus, for Canada, it also means greater energy security, relying on your own resources instead of imports. But, and this is a huge but, this economic engine comes at a cost. And this is where that balance really starts to tip. Because the extraction process is so energy intensive, oil from the tar sands generates 15 to 20% more greenhouse gas emissions than conventional crude. In a world that is so focused on climate change, that difference is, well, it's everything. And that brings us right to the environmental price tag. The higher emissions? That's just the beginning. The true cost becomes crystal clear when you see how the oil is actually extracted from the ground. The extraction is this massive, three-step process. First, developers have to clear huge areas of boreal forest. Just gone. Second, they use these incredibly energy-intensive methods to separate the oil. And third, the whole process creates enormous volumes of toxic wastewater, which then has to be stored in these vast things called tailings ponds. The ripple effects from that are just immense. We're talking about large-scale deforestation, the destruction of wildlife habitats. The process also uses vast amounts of fresh water, and those toxic tailings ponds, they pose a constant threat to rivers and groundwater, which just weakens the entire ecosystem's ability to recover. The impact isn't just on the environment in a general sense. It carries a heavy, heavy human cost. And that's especially true for the indigenous communities who have called this land home for generations. These communities are facing serious health concerns, a lot of them linked to air and water pollution. And at the exact same time, they're seeing the loss of traditional lands that they've used for hunting and fishing for centuries, disrupting a way of life that is so deeply connected to the environment. And this has led to direct action. From 2010 to 2014, there was an annual protest called the Healing Walk, and it was held to bring global attention to the issue. But in a really tragic twist of irony, an attempt to restart that walk in 2023 was actually canceled because of the very wildfires that are becoming more frequent and intense in a changing climate.
So, all of this brings us right back to where we started, weighing the pros and cons in this profoundly difficult balance. It's a project that is, without a doubt, a pillar of the economy, but it's one that carries an undeniably heavy cost.
So here is the trade-off, laid out right side by side. On one hand, you've got the promise of jobs, billions in revenue, and energy security. On the other hand, you have the reality of higher emissions, environmental damage, and tangible health concerns for local communities. And you just can't ignore either side of that equation. And this leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? How does a nation balance the demands for energy and prosperity today with the urgent need to secure its environmental future for tomorrow? There are no easy answers here, but understanding what's on both sides of the scale, well, that's the first and most critical step.